Here to talk about one of my favorite topics in coaching, and that is self-care. And I want to talk about a kinder, gentler, loving form of self-care. How does that sound? Very good. Before I get started, let me take a little bit of a show of hands. How many of you did something good for yourselves today? Yes, maybe you ate something that you thought was wonderful for your bodies, you got a little extra sleep last night, got to the gym. Anything? Yeah, it's great. So now I want to ask you too, how many of you wish you got to do a little bit more self-care today than you did? Yep. And how many of you are hoping that tomorrow you'll get to do even more self-care for yourself? Of course, that's what we do. We're health coaches, so we're always thinking about how to do more self-care. And it's so critical for us to keep looking at self-care and go with the ebb and flow of it, right? So this is kind of a mixed bag of self-care. It starts and it stops. And some days is going to be better than others, and that's just the way that it is. And we come to know that that's part of what's going on in our interior environment, maybe how we feel, our energy levels, and what's going on in our exterior environment, the things that kind of pull at us. A lot of you have obligations and people who are pulling at you, and do you sacrifice self-care once in a while? Exactly. So we want to talk about that. It's not that we don't know that we have to take care of ourselves, and it's not that we don't do any self-care, but I think you would agree with me, same as I feel, that I'd love to do more. I'd love to be more consistent at it. Is that something everybody would like, is just be a little bit more consistent at their self-care? And I think I would really like to get rid of the feelings of guilt or disappointment or failure when I don't get to it or I fall off the track, because I think that's really helpful. So one of the best things that I heard when I first became a coach was that self-care was now a part of my job description. And I always loved that because it was like a huge revelation for me. I mean, I could have permission to take care of myself. It was kind of mind-blowing. It was definitely something that changed and shifted the way I looked at what health coaching was going to be. But when I heard it, it came into my head, right? So where everything lands, you learn something new and it's in my head. So self-care then became something that I added to my to-do list. And when it's just on your to-do list, you know what happens. Things come in and out of your to-do list, gets overcrowded, and your self-care goes chink, 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 chink all the way down, and eventually it falls off, right? So it's always sort of this struggle of the to-do list as far as self-care is concerned. So I, over time, started to realize this, and I didn't really want to accept that this was good enough for me. So I really became much more intentional about my self-care. And eventually, I would tell you that it went from the head place, and it trickled into my heart, into my soul, into my cells. And I really got to know that self-care was really the cornerstone of my coaching, as well as the cornerstone of my health. It was the springboard for my coaching. When I really got the value of taking care of myself, I started having very different conversations with my clients. I started looking at it very differently. I started understanding and having a lot more empathy for what they were going through, where they were struggling, where they were stuck. It is really important to understand the experience of self-care and the experience of lack of self-care, and to see where it is we want to make it better. So understanding that value is so important because you can really leverage everything that you learn about self-care to improve your practice, to build a success that is absolutely authentic and based in experience. So when I say it's based in experience, what that means is you can't Google it, you can't download it, you can't read about it, you've got to live it. You've got to live it every day. You've got to experience it. And that is what makes you even more credible and even more authentic and much more attractive to potential clients. So as coaches, I don't know if you've noticed, but as we go forward and deeper into our work, if you've noticed that your personal life and your professional life are much more blended now. They kind of merge together. That line between work and life is very, very iffy at best. And I have a friend of mine who is a mentor who says to me, the years of work-life balance are over. And that's really important as wellness people. We really need to think about that. It's really now more about work-life blending. Work impinges on life and life impinges on work, and we're trying to put it all together, right? And our clients are doing the same thing. They're having a lot more demands put on them, and they're coming to you asking, how am I going to manage all this? They're looking for lifestyle change. We say we're experts in lifestyle change. But I would tell you that the words lifestyle change and self-care are kind of synonymous. They really are one and the same thing. So I want you to start thinking about self-care as home base for you and for your clients. If we do follow a course of self-care, lifestyle change is going to happen. And if self-care is the place we start, it's the place that we can then begin to reconnect with ourselves. This busy blended life does a lot to disconnect us from who we are. And we oftentimes are sort of racing and we're not really present to our life. I think sometimes that's why time seems to go so fast, because we're just not present to the moment. But I would tell you that self-care is a pathway back to yourself. It's a pathway to reconnect with yourself. And it's a really important place for you and for your clients to begin. When you're not feeling grounded, when you're a little lost, when you're not sure what direction to go in, start with self-care. Go back to that home base. Clients, they know that they need help with this. They come to us, they want support, and we give them accountability, which is so valuable. But they already have an idea, and we need to help them create ways and new patterns of being that support them through this process. We need to create ways that are resilient, so that way when the forces of the outside world and the forces of the inside world want to tug them in different directions, they are creating new patterns that serve them rather than serving the patterns that they had in the past. So it's like the tail wagging the dog. We want to switch that around. So I just want to mention, if our clients are needing this, we're needing it too. And so if you are a health coach who does not necessarily embrace the fact that you might need help, and you might need support, and you might need accountability, what you're doing is putting a major stumbling block in front of you for your self-care, for your well-being, as well as for your success. So you really want to absorb this and say, this is something I need to really tackle in a big way. So these stumbling blocks, there's three that I want to talk to you about, that came to mind that I think are important, and they kind of came up for me, so I'm going to mention them to you and see if they resonate with you. The first one is the fear of the spotlight. That means everybody's watching me. They're watching what I eat, they're watching what I drink, my family's examining everything I take in and everything I say, and am I walking my talk? That's basically it, right? And coaches are always worried that they're not walking their talk well enough to be able to help their clients. How can I help my clients if I can't even figure this out for myself? So as a result, you have that trigger of the fraud factor. You know that fraud factor? So I want to just put this out to you as I think about this fraud factor. I think really as coaches, it is more fraudulent to come from a place that says, I have it all figured out, I don't really need help. It's actually more fraudulent to do that. It's more fraudulent to me too, because if you believe in health coaching, if you believe in coaching as a modality, then that means wholeheartedly the best way to move forward with something is to get the support and the accountability that you need. Okay, the next piece I wanted to mention in terms of a stumbling block are that coaches are naturally nurturing. We help everybody, anytime anybody calls, we go running. And, maybe not always, but we do a pretty good job of taking care of the rest of the world first. And so why is that? It's because it's easier and more gratifying sometimes. We're lovely people, but it's so nice to get that, that feedback that you've helped somebody else and you see the changes in their life and they're so appreciative, and that's wonderful. It feels fantastic, and why shouldn't it? But do we use it as a distraction for our own self-care? And when we're focused on others, who aren't we focused on? Ourselves, right? So if you're focused on everybody else, you're not thinking about, all the ways in which you feel like you might be failing. You're not examining your faults. You're not comparing and despairing. So you're focusing on other people. And this is something that also becomes a stumbling block. And to fix it, we just really need to look at what is it that we want, tell ourselves the truth, and how do we go get it? And that third stumbling block is being too busy. And how many of you are just too busy? Right? I'm too busy a lot of the time. But I want you to really examine, what does that really look like and what does it really mean? When your busyness and your productivity are connected to your worthiness, your value in the world, that's where there's an issue, right? When you were born on this face of this planet, you got an admit one ticket. It said admit one be, not admit one do, right? So I want you to just think about and embrace, be aware of the times when you feel like I'm going for it, but in a way that only really validates me. So all these pieces are what I call part of the coaching conundrum, which is just really a situation we need to look like. Think of it as an onion with a lot of layers. And we could tackle it one layer at a time. Now, the basic kind of coach is going to say, let's find a solution. Let's get an answer. Let's put together a strategy. Let's look at your time management. Pull out your calendar. And they're going to try to solve it from the outside in. I would say we got to go from the inside out. We got to look at the truths that are here. We have to tell ourselves the truths. We have to look at our stories. We have to understand what it is that motivates us or demotivates us in these kinds of behaviors and what we want to do or change about it. So I think that's important to know. What kind of coach do you want to be when it comes to self-care? What stories are driving my behavior? At the end of the day, we have to fill our well. We have to fill our well. Otherwise, when we run dry, we've got nothing to give to anyone else. And I really learned this in recent times. I found out that I had toxic mold poisoning. And it was from an environmental thing that I wasn't aware of. All I knew was I felt lousy. I felt really bad. And little by little, I was losing energy and tired all the time and fatigued and just felt nasty. So I thought, maybe it's because I was taking care of my dad while he was sick. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's a lot of other things. Saw a lot of practitioners, did a lot of things, and finally figured it out. And that required clearly a decision and a commitment on my part to detox my body, to rest, to take care of myself. This is when a lot of this self-care piece came together for me in such a strong way. I had sort of these shifts around my self-care that were so helpful for me to start looking at self-care in a whole new way. You know how people get started on change? A lot of times what happens is they get started, and then before you know it, they're off the track already. You know how many times do we all start with good intentions and then we stop? But if you shift the way you're looking at self-care, I think you're going to find that you can stay with it longer. It's going to be a completely different picture for you. So I want to share with you these 3 gentle shifts. And they're gentle. It doesn't mean like you have to have a whole radical new approach, but they are very profound in their simplicity. The first one is that I just broadened my definition of self-care. I looked at everything in my life through the lens of self-care. I did a balance sheet, if you will, for all the things that were giving me energy and all the things that were taking away energy. Positive self-care and negative self-care. Okay? So I really needed to get rid of some of the things of the negative self-care. Some things that I could drop, I dropped. But the rest of the things were things that I kind of needed to do and I needed to be with. So I figured if I change my mindset around some of those things and consider a way to make it self-care, wouldn't it be easier? My goal was to move as much from this column over to this column. So even something like doing my dishes, which like I hate to do. I love to cook, but I hate to clean up afterwards. Scrubbing the pots. Anybody else do that? Hate it. Wish I had somebody just to come in and whoosh, make my kitchen like magic. But it doesn't work that way. Anyway, I started thinking, okay, I'm going to call a friend while I'm doing it. I'm going to play music while I'm doing it. I'm going to do a gratitude exercise. Every dish I clean, I'm grateful for something else. And I knew at the end of it, I was going to have that kitchen that I walk into and I feel a sense of ease and calm and inspiration. And that's what I really wanted. More and more of that. So really everything in your life, you can cast a net around to call it and shift it and twist it into something that's going to mean self-care for you. It's not just about getting a massage. It's not just about getting to the spa. It's about these daily activities that we're part of that we can shift for ourselves. So anything that brings you ease, that gives you calm, that puts in order, that brings you closer to who you are, that's what we want more of. All right, the second shift is really about facing the fact that we may be ready, we may be willing, but we may not be able. Okay? So I believe you with all your heart, and every client who tells me, I really want this, I want this change, they may be ready and willing, but they just may not be able. There may be something going on in here or out in the world that doesn't have them in alignment with what needs to happen. So we're kind of like set up for failure if we go forward at that point. We really want to make sure everything is in alignment to be able to move forward. One case in point, I was going to a gym about 30 miles away from my home. It became too much with taking care of my dad and everything. I wound up being closer to home. I said, the solution is get to a gym closer to your house. Great, that was an outside-in solution. So I went and signed up at the gym. And, well, let's put it this way. They get my monthly donation, but I rarely see them. So here's the story. I mean, it wasn't the right solution for me. The right solution for me was 10 feet from my bed, I have a treadmill. And 10 feet from my bed is something that I can look at first thing in the morning that is now surrounded by visual things to remind me how important it is for me to take care of myself. It's almost like a little altar around my treadmill. And it works with my work-life blending because I can get on, I can get off and go do something, get on again. So it meets me where I am, right? So meet the client where they are and meets me where I am. And it's totally, totally doable. And I hooked up a DVR or DVD so I can watch programs, I can listen to CDs. So I linked it with something else that is also enjoyable for me. So you see, finding ways to support it and having accountability, which I do to my coach, about getting on it, really have helped me move forward with that. So think about all the different ways that you can really support those kind of goals. You know, we want to have a level of readiness to do this kind of work, but you also have to look at the level of commitment that someone has. So I had a friend of mine, I was having lunch with him, and he says to me, ask me a question. I so love being put on the spot like that. But I said, all right, great. I say, what is the commitment you have in your life that is going to change your world this way? You know, what are you committed to changing in the coming year? So he said to me, I really want to work less. I'm an entrepreneur, I work too much. I really want to work fewer hours and take time off for myself. I said, that's so great. So now a regular coach would say, all right, how are we going to make that happen, right? Like basic entry-level coaching. The better question really is, part 2 of the question is, what's the underlying commitment you have? What is that underlying commitment that's under this commitment that has the potential to knock that one out? And then he was quiet for a while and he said, the underlying commitment is that it's my business and I like to touch everything and I don't know if I can give over control to somebody else to do it the way that I want to do it. So that was big. And as a coach, that's what you want to know because that's the piece that you need to work on. That's the piece you need to pull out and say, okay, let's figure that part out, right? If you had just gone to solution immediately and figured out 14 different ways for him to take more time off, would he have taken more time off? No, because that underlying commitment would have always been undermining him. So very important. Okay, and then the last shift that I wanted to share with you is this power of accountability plus. Accountability plus focus. This is an amazing formula. Single-minded focus has gotten me very far in my life, and I love that concept. But single-minded focus plus accountability has kicked my butt and gotten me to do things and go places I never thought I would do. And what I really get is the more important the goal is. And what's more important than taking care of yourself, right? The more important the goal is, the more levels of accountability you need. More people you may need to have involved, more systems you need, not to make it overly complicated, but for sure, more people, the better holding you accountable. Because you really can be slippery. I know, I can be very slippery about accountability sometimes, right? So you have to find the right coach or the right combination of coaches or the right combination of systems that are going to help keep you on track with that. When I was going through my whole especially my initial recuperation, it was all about self-care first. The first thing I said in the morning, self-care first. How am I going to do it? What am I going to do it? What is it going to look like today? That was the first thought in the morning. And that was my single-minded focus. And then reporting to someone what I did, that was my accountability. So it's a really powerful formula. So I'm going to challenge you to sort of try it out with a few things and see how it goes. And then I'm going to challenge you to go for the gold. I want you to pick something that really has a lot of leverage, something that initially seems maybe simple, but actually has the power to sort of start your own inner ripple effect. So when it starts within here, it's going to go out to your clients, it's going to go out to the rest of the world. And that's what we're looking for, the things that are game changers, the things that can really make a big difference. And it doesn't have to look like, simple self-care. It could be something radical. Maybe you want to move. Maybe you want to change something else really big in your life. It could be something like that. So something to think about. So with all of these things, perfection is not required. As a matter of fact, it's prohibited. Doesn't that sound good? Perfectionism is really a form of negative self-care. So the more you find yourself doing it, the more you're putting tick marks in that column. That's of negative self-care. So you want to just be aware of it. All or nothing thinking is really a trap. And you know that, right? It's just we're never going to find the perfect time to get it all done, to do everything we want to do, You're never going to have the 2 perfect hours to go to the gym. You might need to do 10 push-ups now and 20 sit-ups later. However, you've got to break it up to make it work for you is what you have to do. And that's what we have to accept. It's not about ever finding that perfect time. And what fuels that perfectionism is that fear of failure. And that fear of failure, as a coach right now, I'd like you to sort of picture on a screen that word, failure. And you know how sometimes they make it dissolve? Just see it dissolve. It doesn't exist. If you're a coach, the word failure needs to be eradicated from your vocabulary because there is no more failure. There is only learning. There is only a coachable moment in front of you. So it's time to really let that go. It does not serve you. Change is rarely a straight line process, and you know that. The last thing I want to share with you is my divine download around self-care. I call it soul-centered self-care. And that's really what we've been talking about here. Soul-centered self-care is an alignment with who you are. It's not based on the shoulds and the oughts and those old goals that are so fatigued you don't even want to look at them anymore. It is something that builds resilience and strength within you. It's heart-centered, not head-centered. If I had to have a conversation with myself in the morning about whether or not to get on the treadmill, wouldn't happen. I just wouldn't do it. Because if it's a head decision, it's not going to happen. I need a place where it's just pulling me from who I am and what I want and what I desire. And that's where I want my self-care to be. Because then it's a joy. It's not a chore. It's not another thing on your to-do list. At the end of the day, self-care, especially soul-centered self-care, flows into self-love. The amount of self-care you're doing, the type of self-care you're doing, whatever it is a reflection of the love you have for yourself. And so as coaches, this is ultimately our goal, right? This is the other part of your job description. It is to increasingly love and accept yourself and to create and hold a space for your clients to do the same. Thanks.